distinguished guests and SAI members to come at the front, and then everyone in the audience, you either can, I think we can maybe, can you stand up so we can all be in the photo and everyone is visible? So can we quickly all get up, and the photo will be taken from the stage into the audience. So especially for the first front rows, please stand up and let's do this quickly so we can get to the thing we were here for. All right, now that we all have a proof that this happened and we didn't dream about it, may I ask everyone to just take a seat, get ready, and if possible, stay with us for the remaining of the lecture and try avoid going in and out of the room because it is obviously could be distracting. So first of all, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, it is my, okay. Are we all good to start? All right. It's my pleasure to welcome you here at this special event here at Chaloem School of Integrated Innovation. Here we believe that the education should be integrated lifelong and that we should upskill and reskill ourselves as we go through life, and we shift our careers and we shift the angles, we shift our perspectives, so we need to be able to understand how to live this life. So here, it is first of all great to see all of you here coming and joining us here at BASA at SAI. We love to have people join and come together so that we can foster a community of like-minded individuals who are always curious and always looking for the opportunities to learn. Today, we're very honored to have Mr. Bill Burnett, speaker for today's lecture. He is a designer, an educator, and an adjunct professor at Stanford University. He is also an executive director of the design program at Stanford and co-director of the Live Design Lab at Stanford University. In addition to all of these wonderful accomplishments, he is also a co-author of the New York Times bestseller Designing Your Life, which is also the topic of today's session. So I'm pretty sure quite a few of you have read it, and we are very excited to have Mr. Bill Burnett speak and give us the presentation. But before I invite Mr. Bill on stage, may I invite Professor Dr. Warsak Kanoknukulchai, the Executive Director for Chaloem School of Integrated Innovation, to give an opening remarks and welcome Mr. Burnett to stage. So give a warm round of applause and let's start this session today.
Good evening. Well, today we are quite fortunate to have the Professor Bill Burnett with us. But first of all, I would like to welcome our guests, faculty, students, and distinguished guests from outside. About Professor Bill Burnett, I'm sure most of us know about him. As Dalia already told, he is the adjunct professor and executive director of design program at Stanford University, where he directs both undergraduate and graduate courses in design. He also co-founded Stanford Live Design Lab, which applies design thinking to address life's most pressing challenges. Before academia, Professor Burnett has a rich career spanning startup to Fortune 100 companies. Notably, he spent 7 years at Apple designing award-winning notebook computers, and he has even contributed to the design of the iconic Star Wars toys in the toy industry. If you ever ask yourself how to design a life that you love, you may already be familiar with the New York Times best-selling books, Designing Your Life, as well as Designing Your Work Life. So we are very lucky to have the real Professor Burnett here, live. He is going to share his insights and expertise. So I would like to request all joining me in extending our warm welcome to Professor Bill Burnett.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. And the School of Integrated Innovation. What a great school. It reminds me of our D School at Stanford, where we bring people together, because we know that it's when we collaborate together that we come up with the best and the most interesting innovations. So I'm really happy to be here at your D School. Okay, projector. Okay. So I've titled my talk Disruption Design, because I think we're in a period right now that's very, sometimes very difficult, right? We've had all sorts of different kinds of disruption, including the global pandemic, and I want to talk about how we can think about our futures when everything seems so uncertain and so difficult. But I think, as designers, we have to be optimistic, and we have to believe that we can make the next design better than the first one. So I'm going to talk about how we do that, and I'm mostly going to focus on how we do that with our lives. And so at the Life Design Lab, we say that our mission is to teach the classes that help you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. What do you want to be? In the United States, people ask children this question all the time. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? When I was 8 or 9 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut, right? But there's something wrong with this question, and so, or with this mission statement. So I'm gonna do my first reframe. Designers like to change the question and find a better way of describing the situation. And in this case, I want to come up with a better mission statement. And here's the reason why. If growing up means you lose your curiosity, you lose your sense of wonder with the world, if growing up means you stop learning, then I don't want to grow up. I never want to grow up. I am very, very happy and blessed. I have a new 2-year-old grandson. He's 2 years old. His name is Connor. It's my first grandson. And 2-year-olds, they only know one question. Why? Why, Grandpa? Why, Grandpa? Why, Grandpa? Why the tree? Why the bird? Why the thing? Why? He's so curious. And he reminds me that we all had that curiosity in us when we were young. But then school and other things maybe made us not practice our curiosity as much. And so when I reframe this sentence, I say, the Life Design Lab teaches the class that helps you figure out what you want to grow into, what you want to become as your life design unfolds. Because our life isn't a single end point. We don't be, we become. And every year, we have the opportunity of becoming even more than the year before. So that's my reframe. And that's the way we run the Life Design Lab at Stanford. Now, we wrote a book. By the way, I'm the co-author of the book. I'm the co-founder of the lab. My partner, Dave Evans, could not be here. He sends his regards. He is traveling in Europe right now. But we wrote this book in 2016, and it was pretty successful. And now the book has come out in 24 languages, including Thai. I love the Thai book. The cover is so beautiful. It's my favorite cover of all the 24 covers, honestly. And about 1 million books have been sold, and then we wrote Designing Your Work Life. Designing Your Work Life. So we launched Designing Your Work Life at a big launch event with our New York publisher. We flew to New York. We had a big party. We were on TV. We went to the Empire State Building. We did interviews with ABC, the BBC in London. And it was on February 27th, 2020. February 2020, we launched the book. By the time I had flown home from New York, the next week in March, the whole world shut down. And we weren't sure how long it would take, but it took a very long time. And so we have actually done a second edition of this book called Designing Your New Work Life, because the world of work has changed dramatically. The world that you will enter into work is now hybrid, it's remote, it has many different ways of working, some of which are, I think, very, very good for more creative work, and some of which are more challenging. But we didn't want to just make the second edition about COVID, so we talked about disruption, because there's a lot of disruption. Just last week, there was these floods in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. I used to go to, I had an office in Hong Kong for many years. The water was 5 feet high on the street. We've had this massive flooding in Libya. Climate is crazy everywhere. And we have economic disruption, we have social disruption. So we really dug in on the second book about how to think about designing when everything is changing. Because it's harder, right? It's harder. So we talked to lots of people, and it turns out people get stuck. I did not do that to the cow. That was just a picture I found on Google. But the cow is stuck like people get stuck, and they're stuck because their jobs are boring. In the Gallup organization that does polling has done a poll every year for 20 years, and they ask workers in every country, in the US and Thailand and Japan and Canada, Europe, they ask the workers, how engaged are you in your job? How much do you like your job? And for 20 years in the US, almost 70% of workers don't like their job. They're disengaged. Thailand, it's about 80%. The country with the most unhappy workers is Japan. 93% of Japanese workers are disengaged. And about 40% of Japanese workers are actively disengaged. It means they really hate their job. And it's a tragedy, because jobs should be where we get to express our most creative self. It's where we get to apply our talents. So boring jobs. Lack of meaning. When COVID hit and we were all by ourselves, people got lonely, they got depressed, we couldn't be in classrooms together, we were doing everything on video, and the meaning in our lives disappeared in some ways, right? And there's certainly economic stress. I've been on a tour of all of the groups that are working with me on Designing Your Life. Last week I was in China, in Beijing and Shanghai. And the people there are very, very worried about the economy. The economy is coming down very rapidly. Many people are losing their jobs. And I think we still have post-pandemic stress. I think we haven't fully worked out all of the things that the pandemic did to us, including, just as a side note, a piece of data. Last month in the United States, the Surgeon General of the United States, our top doctor, the doctor who's the chief doctor for the whole country, issued an advisory report, a special advisory, in which he said, his name is Vivek Murthy, he said, the biggest healthcare crisis in America right now is not cancer, is not heart disease, it's not diabetes. The biggest crisis in healthcare in America right now is loneliness, a massive epidemic of loneliness. People are lonely, they're depressed, they feel isolated. And he thinks that the major cause of this, particularly in the younger generation, Gen Z and younger, is social media. Because social media isn't actually social. It separates us from each other. And it's a huge healthcare crisis. So jobs are boring. We're struggling to find meaning. The economies are difficult. We're still suffering from the pandemic and loneliness. And we have this epidemic of social media that's creating, really fracturing our societies. And so when designers see these kinds of problems, they say, okay, we have to apply our principles of design. How can we work on these problems and make the world better? So it's all about disruption. And the thinking that got us into this mess is not going to be sufficient to get us out. We'll need to think differently. And I'm going to suggest that what we need to do is stop trying to plan and stop trying to engineer, because we can't engineer something unless we have data, and we're talking about our futures, so there's no data. And in the face of all these disruptions, we have to think like designers. So if you've had a design thing, if you're in the integrated school, if you've had some design thinking classes, you might have seen this diagram. We say, when I'm teaching my students to design speakers and clickers and microphones and laptops and apps on their iPhone and web pages on their web, when I'm teaching them, I say, don't start with the problem, start with people. Empathy, find out what's really going on below the system. We have what we call the empathy iceberg. It's easy to see what's happening above the water, but get below the water and understand, how are people really thinking and feeling? And then define or redefine the problem, because you're always working on the wrong problem. The first problem you're given is never the right problem. You have to go deeper. Then come up with lots of ideas. Because we know if you have lots of ideas, you're going to choose better. The research is very clear. Then build and test, prototype and test, prototype and test. Now, when you mentioned my biography, I was at Apple for 7 years. It was a wonderful job. Apple is a really interesting and dynamic place to work. And I was there when we were doing the first laptops, which we call PowerBooks, but now we call them MacBooks. How many people have a MacBook? Yeah, so my team did the very first MacBook. And we didn't know what a laptop would be because no one had made one before, so we had to make lots and lots and lots of prototypes, and we finally kind of figured it out. And when we thought we had it just right, and we introduced it, it was very successful. And now all notebooks have the keyboard in the back and the pointing device in the front and are organized the way we originally organized it. And I wasn't at Apple when they were doing the iPhone. That was later, but I know people in the team. Now, you're all too young to remember this, but when the iPhone came out, 2006, 2007, the most popular cell phone was the BlackBerry. Did you have a BlackBerry? Yeah, I had a BlackBerry. All business people had a BlackBerry of that age. But if you were a designer, you had the Motorola Razr, which was a thin flip phone made of aluminum, very sexy. So if you read the blogs and the news reports, The rumor was Apple's going to do a phone, Apple's going to do a phone. What's it going to be like? Well, it's going to be thin and made of aluminum. It's going to have an amazing keyboard. You know, it'll be just like the BlackBerry plus the Razor. And of course, that wasn't it at all. They completely changed the rules. And when they were building the iPhone, it took 3 or 4 years, and they made hundreds of prototypes. I've spoken with Johnny Ive. Johnny Ives was the designer at Apple for many, many years, and Johnny and Steve Jobs were the sort of powerhouse design team. And Johnny comes to my class every year, and he talks to my students. He's a very generous, kind man. And he said, we didn't know what we were doing. We had some ideas, but we weren't really sure how to do it, so we just kept building prototypes. And they showed the phone to Steve Jobs 3 times, and 3 times he said, no, I don't think that's it. That's not good enough. Do it again. Do it again. There was no specification, because there's no specification for the thing that's never been built before. So how do we invent the thing that's never been built before? We prototype and test, and then check our assumptions, and then redefine the problem, and then come up with lots of ideas and do it again and again and again. And that's how we invent the future, and that's how you invent your life. You can prototype everything in your life to find your true path. So that's the method, but more important, I want you to learn to think like a designer. Now you're in this, very innovative school, so you're already realizing that the interesting problems are at the intersection of disciplines. When David Kelly started the D School in 2006, and we started this interdisciplinary idea, our president of the university at the time, John Hennessy, said, the interesting problems in the future will lie between the disciplines, between engineering and biology, between biology and AI, between computer science and ethics. That's where the interesting new research will be, and the best researchers will be interdisciplinary. So you are right on the leading edge of what we believe is the future of education. But the mindsets start with curiosity. Curiosity is that thing that gets us going, gets us over our fear of trying something new. And it's critical for our thinking to start with curiosity. And then we say, reframe the problem, come up with a better problem, a problem with a bigger solution space. And then we try to collaborate with lots of people, radical collaboration, because the answer's in the world with people, with this network of intelligences, bashing ideas together and coming up with something new. A bias to action, because what are you analyzing? There's no data. You're trying to invent something that's never happened before, that's never existed before, the you in the future. You can't get data, so let's try some stuff. And then mindful of process, because sometimes we're looking for lots of ideas, right? Sometimes we're testing. Now, it's interesting, this curiosity mindset. I'm going to give you just a little tiny little lecture on neuroscience, because I think it's interesting what we now know about the brain. And then I promise we're going to do a couple of exercises. But there are a number of tests that we can give people to find out, are they naturally creative, and are they very, very creative, or normally creative or not very creative at all. And the tests are reasonably accurate. We've been using them for years and years. And if we take 100 people and we test them, only 4 or 5 will test very high creative. Generally, people are not, on this test particularly scoring very high. And we think we know the reason. But the thing that's interesting is that when we put these people who are highly creative in a fMRI machine, when we scan their brains, and we compare it to brains of normal people, And we do a test which tests for what psychologists call the fear response to novelty. If I show you something new you've never seen, the accurate response is to go, oh, what's that? You should have a fear. If you don't know what it is, it could be dangerous, you should have a fear. You're walking through the forest, you see a bright red flower, you've never seen it before, it could be poisonous, you should go, oh, I'm going to step away from that. So in a normal brain, when we show you pictures of things you've never seen before, even if the things aren't particularly dangerous, they're just novel, they're just new, your brain lights up, the amygdala fires, your fight, flight, or freeze response turns on, and you might not even realize it, but you're getting ready to, move away from whatever the novel thing is because it might be dangerous. Okay, that's 95 of 100 of you would have that normal response. When we put the high creatives in the brain scanner, we show them something they've never seen before. Instead of, walk up to the red flower and go, ooh, what's that? They go, ooh, what's that? And they pick it up, and they eat it, and they die. Which is why there's only 5 out of 100 of them left. Because it would make sense that evolution would select for a high fear response to novelty and low curiosity. Except there's a reason that evolution leaves about 5% of people in the high creativity, where they have, in the scanner, we see no response. We show them something they've never seen before, and their brain does not change. So why would evolution allow that? It's very dangerous, right? You could accidentally, hurt yourself or not react to something that is dangerous, and that would be a negative evolutionary opportunity. But here's the thing. Where's, no, he's not here, okay. So let's say we're a tribe of cave people, and we have our shaman, our magical, shaman person who sits over here. He organizes the hunt. He does a special ritual. We go to the valley. We find the buffalo. We kill the buffalo. We bring it home. We eat it. It's wonderful, right? We like it. We're good. The tribe is healthy. The tribe has food. It's all good. Okay. But then one day we do the magic incantations, and we go to the valley, and there's no buffalo. And we come back and we ask the shaman, we say, Shaman, what happened? Where's the buffalo? He says, oh, I'll do some more magic. Does some more magic, we go to the valley, there's no buffalo. Now, we're really hungry. And we're really worried that we don't have any food. But it turns out we have our executive director. And when we used to go hunting, he stayed home and he would draw pictures on the wall of the cave. We hadn't even invented art yet, so we don't really know what he was doing, but he was drawing pictures. And so we're all gathered around the fire, we're saying we're very hungry, and he says, when you guys go to that valley, I've been walking around the other valleys because I just like to, I think differently. And these pictures of the animals with the long horns, maybe we could eat them. So he takes us to the other valley. There are these big elks. We kill them. Everybody has food. The tribe is happy. Obviously, the old shaman has lost his magical powers, so we kill him. And the new shaman gets a big tent, and everybody thinks he's magic because he was thinking a little differently. And when the situation changes, when you run out of buffalo and you need a new idea, we need a few people who think differently. And so we think that's why evolution leaves them in the population. This is true in companies. You have a company, maybe you work for an SME, your parents' company, it's a very successful company, it's 30 years old, it makes a product, and all of a sudden, new competitors come in from China, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, and they're taking away your market. And now you need to think differently because you have a crisis, right? So we know that creativity is not, the reason I know you're all as creative as I am is that we know that creativity is not something extra. It's not like I have extra circuits that you don't have. You have all the circuits, but you have this high fear response to novelty. The problem with the person who doesn't have that circuit, right, a brain defect, they don't respond properly, is they're awkward. Maybe you know some artists or some people who are very, creative, but they're kind of crazy. They can't get organized. They don't stay on task. They change what they're working on all the time, so they're not very organized. So you are actually in a better position than a person who's highly creative, because I can teach you, I can train you to turn off your fear response. I know I can train you. In my class, in this class, and in my other design classes, we do a lot of brainstorming kind of activities, brainstorming, mind mapping, morphological analysis. We push the students really hard to have lots of ideas. And we know from research that if you take my class, you double the amount of ideas that you can have. If you had 5 ideas in 10 minutes, you can have 10. If you had 50 ideas in 20 minutes, you can have 100. So isn't that nice that you have the advantage, actually, over the highly creative? If you learn to put your brain in the right mindset, you can be as creative as anyone. And then, when it comes time to make a plan and execute your process, you can turn on your decision-making processes and be very effective. So really, you're an advantage over the highly creative because they have no control. Now, you may not be all the way there yet. Maybe sometimes the fear response turns on, you don't even notice it, and so you censor ideas without even knowing that the ideas aren't actually available to you. But you can do it. With about 100 hours of training, I can get you to a pretty good state. With 1,000 hours of training, you can be amazing. I have about 100,000 hours of training because I started this when I was very young. So I can put my brain, and they've actually studied me in a number of different studies, because I can put my brain into that mode easily. And then what happens is, if you look in the scanner, my left brain and my right brain light up, the front of my brain turns off. That's the prefrontal cortex, the decision-making brain. The corpus callosum, which connects the two, fires up. There's lots of activity. And I go into what I call a frictionless state. And I can have 1,000 ideas in an hour. Wouldn't that be fun? You can teach yourself to do it. All right, I'm sorry, that was a long side story, but I'm just so excited about the fact that everyone, because we used to think, well, some people are creative and some people are not, and if you're not, then you should probably just go do finance. But it's not true. And it's also true that if you have some creativity in your life, it's just a better life. You don't have to be an artist to be creative. And we'll do an exercise on that in a second. All right. So we got the mindsets, we got the process, and I'm going to give you some ideas. Now, we can only do a couple of workshop things together because we don't have that much time. But I picked the 2 that I thought were the most interesting and the ones that I get the feedback from, certainly from my students and from other people in their early careers, that these are really useful. And we'll go through 4 ideas, but 2 of them you actually have a worksheet for. So now, normally I'd say I don't want to be in a lecture hall, because in a lecture hall you know what to do. You sit down, you just listen, and maybe you look at your phone, and you're passive. When we do our class, it's a design class, it's an active experience. It's like if I'm teaching you golf, I can't lecture and show you pictures of a golf club. We got to go out and swing the club, right? So if I'm going to teach you design, we got to design things together, and normally you'd be in a table of 6. and we'd have lots of prototyping materials available. But we can do these two exercises in this format. But you got to get out of the lecture brain and into the activity brain for me, okay? So the first one, to get you unstuck, is this idea of balance. Every student I know, every young professional I know, has this question, gee, you know, I got so much work to do, and I hardly have any time for my friends or for life. How do I find the perfect work-life balance? Is that something that you've heard people say? I need, you know, school life, work life, I need to balance it because it feels like sometimes I'm just working all the time and I don't have time for the things that I care about. And I'm going to tell you right now that this is also a bad question. It's not true. And whenever you have somebody saying it's either A or B, you know it's time for a reframe because the world is never A or B. The world is much more complex. And besides, in this game, this zero-sum game, I have more work, I have less life. I have more life, I don't make any money. What's the best? Crummy life, crummy work? That's a terrible game. I don't want to play that game. I want to change that game. The change is, it's interesting, we can find a reframe that expands the question away from a false A-B into something that's bigger. There's quite a bit of research on decision making. If you have only an A and a B decision in front of you, you just have two options, 60% of the time you will make a poor choice. 50-50, you could make a good or bad choice, but actually when you have two options, 60% of the time you make a bad choice. If you just have one more option, it turns out your ability to make a good choice goes up 70%. You know, and I'm quoting a lot of research because, as you know, Stanford is a research university, so I don't make this stuff up. I can't just stand in front of a class and say, hey, you should change your idea about balance, or hey, you should be more creative. I have to have it based in research, either research we have done or research that comes from positive psychology or neuroscience. So this isn't my opinion. This is me telling you about research and making it practical for you. So we reframe. It's not 2, it's not 3, it's 4. There's work. Work is something you do a lot of. But there's play. It turns out your brain is wired for play. Play is how we learn. And play is what you do, not to win or lose, but simply to continue playing. Play is what you do without the objective of anything other than your own learning and satisfaction. Love, it turns out, on the longest running study of adult development, the Harvard Grant study of adult development, which started in the mid-30s with the men at Harvard, and they've been studying them all the way through to today. There's only about 30 of them left, well into their 90s. And now Robert Waldinger, who has a great TED Talk on this, has expanded the study to include 2,000 of the original people studies children so they can continue this thing, 90-year study or 87-year study. What is the number one thing that leads to the longest life? I saw you smiling. What is the number one thing that leads to the healthiest life, a healthiest lifespan? What is the number one thing that correlates with saying your life was meaningful? It's not how much money you make. It's not how important your job is. It's not, how nice your house is. It's not your IQ, no correlation. Nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with social status. The number one thing that causes you to live longer, live healthier, and report your life as meaningful is love. Deep relationships, relationships in your own community, relationships in your family, and most importantly, things that you do for others, not yourself. Service, compassion. Now, that's a 80-year study, billions of dollars have been spent on it, but haven't we known that the true path to enlightenment comes from compassion and love for about 3,000 years? This proves it. And then the fourth thing is health. And that's both mental health and physical health, because without that, you can't sustain the other three. All right, so now Dave and I, when we made this up, we looked at the research. We said, okay, there's 4 things that are critical to a life that feels like it's in balance. So how do we do this? Well, we like cars. Dave and I like cars. We're car guys. So we said, let's make it a dashboard, like on your car, like how much oil do you have? How much gas do you have? How fast are you going? Every dial is important. They're all independent. You can have 100% of gas, 100% oil, 100% electrical charge, if it's a gas engine. So we made it a dashboard, and it looks like that. Please take out the form that you've got that looks like that, your dashboard form. And it's work, play, love, and health. And you can have 0 in your tank, or you can be full. You can have 50%, 20%, and each one's independent. You're not trying to make them all add up. They're all independent, just like you can have a full tank of gas and no oil. Bad thing for your car. All right. So when I did this assessment, just recently, I went through each one and I said, you know, my work is very full. I'm traveling a lot, and it's a little challenging, but it's okay because I really like talking about this and meeting new people all over the world. It's in China, I'm here in Thailand, I'm going to Singapore next. It's really fun. My work is really full. I'm full and happy. It's not too much. Play. Yeah, it's really low. I don't get to play with my grandson. I don't get to play with my wife. I don't get to go to my studio and goof around and make art. It's really low. Love. Well, I have just had a second granddaughter. She was born just before I left on this trip, so I think she's 4 weeks old now. Between my grandson Connor and my granddaughter, my life is full of love. And I'm finding new ways to connect to my family and my children. It's a magical time for me. And health is pretty good. I'm walking 6,000 to 10,000 steps a day. I got my watch on. I go to the gym. When I'm traveling, I don't always go to the gym as much as I should, but my health is okay. So I look at my dashboard and I go, pretty good. Car's in good shape, except play. Play is really low. In fact, it's in the danger zone. If my play is that low, it means I'm not using my curiosity, my creativity very much, and I'm not learning anything. So that's step 1 in the assessment. Where are you right now? I have a pin on, you can't see it, but it says you are here. If anyone has a copy of the original book, the American edition of the book, if you take the cover off, you'll see embossed on the hardcover is a thing that says you are here. It's because over the studio at the Stanford studio where the graduate students work, it's called the Loft, there's a big sign that says you are here. And it's because design starts in reality. It starts with empathy for the situation. Where are you really at? And in this case, from life design, it's empathy for yourself. Where are you really at? Where am I at? Work's pretty good, play's a mess, love is great, health's okay. And that gives me a starting point to think about what I want to change. So, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Take out the dashboard. And you will share this with somebody, but try to be honest. I don't want your Instagram rating. Oh, my world is great, my life is great, my play is great. I don't want your social media persona. I want your real person, the real you are here. So take out the dashboard. The gauges are work, play, love, and health. Work is how full up are you in work? Too much, too little, just enough, whatever. Love is relationships with people around you and in your community. Health is both your mental health and your physical health. Both are necessary to have a well-running engine. And play is whatever you do for fun, to learn, and not for gain. Okay, it's just what you do to enjoy yourself. Could be video games, could be, anything, right? All right. So I want you to fill out the gauges to indicate how full or satisfied you are in each of these areas of your life. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and I'm going to play a song while you think, okay? Go.
Words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither wildly as they slip away across the river. Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my opened mind, possessing and caressing me.
If anyone needs some help, raise your hand, I'll come over and help you.
ใครไม่ทันหรือไม่เข้าใจยกมือได้นะครับเดี๋ยวจะอธิบายให้นะครับ
Change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Images of broken light which dance before me like a million eyes. They call me on and on across the universe. Floats me under like a restless wind inside a letterbox. They tumble blindly as they make their way across the universe. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world.
All right. Hopefully you've made an intuitive set of bars on your dashboard. Now we know kind of how the car's running. And potentially there's something that you noticed. Like I noticed, hey, my play is really low. I hadn't really paid attention to that, but I noticed it when I did the dashboard. So what's working for you on your dashboard? And what's not working so well? And where might you focus? I put that star on play to make a change. And here's where we get to prototype something. So let me show you something. I'm going to skip ahead here. What you look at your thing, you say, hey, my play is low, and then you go, what could I do? What small prototype could I run to make a little bit of a change? And a prototype means you got to be able to do it within 1 week. It can't cost a lot of money. It has to be available. I'll tell you what I did, because this was a while back. You know, I realized my play was bad, and then I thought, well, I'm very busy. I need something I can do that will fit in my schedule easily. And, you know, and it didn't take too much looking, but it turned out, I live in San Francisco, and just a few blocks from my house, I didn't know this, was a dance studio. And the dance studio, you could sign up for classes, they cost almost nothing, to learn to tango. Tango is a very complicated form of dance. It's lots of movements. I'm not a very good dancer. But I signed myself and my wife up for tango lessons, 6 lessons, the beginner lessons. And on Wednesday night, we would walk down and try to learn to tango for an hour. And she's very good, but I'm very bad. So then we took the 6 beginning lessons the second time because I hadn't learned them very well. But, you know, I wasn't trying to get on television, you know, as a dancer. I was just trying to have something in my life where I was learning a new thing just for the joy of learning it. And I didn't realize this at the time, but the best part of this prototype was I was doing it with my wife. And so we were getting extra time together. So I got not only adding dance lessons, my play went way up, right? And because my wife and I were talking and we were laughing and, you know, I would step on her toes and apologize and she thought it was cute that I was trying, I got extra love. I got extra relationships, right? So I got a 2-for-1 out of my prototype, and it cost me $30. What happens in these assessments is, because we're breaking your balance into 4 things instead of 1, and since all 4 can be optimized independently, you're no longer in that trap, oh, more of this, less of that, more of this, less of that, because that's not the way life works. There's always time for a little more play. There's always time for a little more love. Maybe some of you have said, well, I don't think my health is that good. I'm really not getting a lot of exercise. Or my mental health hasn't been good lately. I've been sort of depressed or sad because of, you know, COVID or something else. But once you see what's on your dashboard, you have the ability to design the next dashboard to make it just a little better. And our method is not to make big changes. It's called set the bar low. Try very small changes. So think about a change you want to make. You get a 2-for-1 out of this. And, well, before we do that one, we're just gonna go back. I want some music. Where's some music? Oh, anyway. So, yeah, go take a look at your thing, figure out what you want to change, write down a little prototype next to the change that you're making, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Come on, where's my... All right. So figure out the change, figure out your objective, come up with 1 or 2 ideas of something really simple that you could try. And then, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you to pair up and just share your dashboards. Okay? Do you have an idea? All right. And when you talk with your partner, what your partner is supposed to do in a design challenge, right? You don't criticize their ideas. You don't debate with them their ideas. You say, that's a great idea, and have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? So we're trying to amplify the conversation, not diminish it. So everybody pair up with someone next to you. Show them your dashboard, tell them what you're going to do for a prototype, and see what suggestions they have. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and then we're going to switch, and then 3 minutes, and then we'll move on. Go. Okay, switch, please. Switch with your partner. Now you tell them about your balanced dashboard and they can give you ideas. I'll give you 3 minutes. Please switch. You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds to talk about your dashboard. Okay, stop. Please stop. Please stop. Stop. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting how interesting the people are in this room? They have so many interesting ideas. And we did this is very simple. We just looked at balance a different way. We opened up the solution space. We talked about building a prototype to change my balance, to make an improvement. And there's something here I want to read on the slide. Designing something changes the future that is possible. Before you had an iPhone, you didn't know you needed an iPhone. But once you had one, the future was completely different. Whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung, doesn't matter. Once you make a small change in your balance, because every design is better than the last one, you'll notice that something positive has occurred. If not, you make a different prototype. If we had more time, we have a whole set of exercises on how to build good prototypes. Because prototypes probe the future. Every time I show you something, it changes what you think is possible. Every time you build a prototype and change how people react to you, you change what is possible. And it can have some amazing results. The takeaway for this exercise is quite simple. Never fall into the work-life trap. Never fall into any binary, money versus meaning, work versus life. It doesn't work that way. The world is more complex, luckily, and we are full of more options than just two. It can be helpful to define balance. This is one method of doing it. And because when you're making changes or when you find yourself in a situation where something doesn't feel right, it's a good idea to be able to name it, put it in a framework, and solve for it. And you can design a life mix at any time that feels more alive to you. Okay, that's balance. The next one is like an interesting question. It's a rude question because normally when someone says, "What do you make?" they mean, "How much money?" And we're not supposed to ask each other how much money. But that's what people think. What do I make? I make money. Now, the research on money and happiness is quite clear, and we've known for at least 20 years that there is no correlation between money and happiness, as long as one condition is met. If you have to have enough money so that you have safety and security, enough money to support yourself and your family, enough money to make sure that your future is secure. But once you have that number, whatever that number is, if that number is 100,000 or 200,000, doubling it makes no increase in happiness. Tripling it makes no increase in happiness. 10 times more money, and you will start to become deeply unhappy. It's interesting because the more you make above what you need, and your needs, I mean, broadly described, not just having enough to pay your rent, but enough to enjoy your life. Past that, there is no correlation to happiness. And in fact, most of the people who come to my mid-career workshop are very successful lawyers, private equity people, venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, very successful finance people, and they report their lives as miserable. They hate it. They have lots of money and nothing in their life that makes them happy. So the what do you make question needs a reframe. Because aren't we all makers in this world? We live in a maker society now. And the question really is important because, as Einstein points out, be careful what you measure. Be careful how you count. Because the most important things can't be counted. And some things that can be counted turn out to be meaningless. So we want to be really, really careful how we measure this making thing. So, as you might imagine, I have a new model, and the model goes like this. What do you make? Well, in the market economy, you do make money. In the market, you exchange your value, your labor, for money, salary. Sometimes you invest that money and you get more money. And it's perfectly reasonable in the market economy to measure money or to ask yourself, how satisfied am I with my money making? But I know lots of people, my students nowadays, are much more interested in starting social entrepreneurship ventures than they are in starting the traditional sort of startup ventures they started back in, 2010, 2012. In 2015, one of my students, young student who was my advisee, came in my office. He had a project that he had to turn in for the class, and he said, I got an idea. This was around the time Instagram was sold to Facebook for $1 billion, and there were lots of apps about your phone and storing pictures and doing pictures and making pictures look beautiful so that you would look beautiful. And he said, Bill, they call me Bill, they don't call me Professor. I said, Bill, everybody's trying to make pictures beautiful and permanent on the internet. What if we made them disappear? And I said, Evan, that's a stupid idea. Why would they want their pictures to disappear? And that was Evan Spiegel, and that's Snapchat. And he went public at a $20 billion valuation and married a supermodel, Miranda Kerr. In his generation, everybody wanted to be like that. They wanted to create some new thing, a new Facebook, a new social media thing. Now my students don't really think about that anymore. They want to start a social enterprise. And in the social economy, you don't measure money, you measure impact. How many children are in your program learning to read? How many women did you rescue from sex trafficking? How many animals got adopted from the shelter and have a home and won't be euthanized? When I meet these people, they don't talk about money. They talk about impact. Interesting. Now we have there's another market in the world, and I know it's important to everybody because we have an exercise we don't have time to do called the Odyssey, where people come up with 3 completely different plans for their lives. It's really fun. And in all of those plans, and the thousands and thousands of Odysseys that I've seen, everybody, every single time in one of their plans has something like, well, I wish my life was a little more creative. I mean, I'm not an artist or anything, but you know, I used to sing in high school, or I used to, you know, I like to bake cakes and do stuff, and I wish I had more time for my creative output. And so I went to the creative economy people, and I said, how do you get paid? Oh, and they said, oh, you know, I'm a writer. When I get to write my story and it gets published, or when I'm my poet and I get to say my poet at the open mic night, or I get to paint my painting, I don't care if people like it. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for expression. In the creative economy, we get paid by expression. Okay, so now we have 3, not 2. Perfect. And we're going to call it a maker mix. And I'm going to use this analogy on purpose. I'm going to use the analogy of a mixing board. Anybody here ever, you know, do digital recording, digital song production, maybe in, you know, something like GarageBand or Logic Pro, and you've got a mixing board, and you want to mix a song. I'm going to argue you're mixing your life song. Now, you know, if you're making a song, even if you've never done it, you don't have 100% bass, 100% treble, and 100% vocal. Because it would be like, it would sound terrible, right? You need a mix. You need a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and every song is different. If I'm playing a rap song, I got more bass. If I'm playing a Bach cello concerto, I need beautiful treble. And you have a song. And you can set the dials and decide what the mix is. And then you can say, gee, I wish I had more expression. And you can just slide that dial up. So here's what we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, Perm, can you come up? I want to make sure that you understand this, because your next worksheet looks like, just like this. And you're going to take that worksheet out and you're going to say, again, assess, where am I right now? You are here. How am I doing on my money? How am I doing on my impact? And how am I doing with my expression? But I want, if you would translate for me in Thai, both like, what does it mean to set the dial?
Okay.
You know, my satisfaction.
Okay.
But also, what do I mean when I say creative expression?
alright โอเคครับก็ในเวิร์กชีตนะครับมันจะมีแกนทั้งหมด3แกนนะครับอยากให้ลองดูนะครับว่าเราอยากจะสร้างอะไรนะครับหรือว่าเราชี้วัดด้วยอะไรนะครับแกนแรกก็คือเป็นเรื่องของเงินนะครับมันนี่เนี่ยก็คือเหมือนว่างานที่เราอยากจะไปเนี่ยแน่นอนเราอยากจะสร้างเงินเนี่ยแล้วก็งานเนี้ยมันให้ความพึงพอใจกับเรื่องของเงินเท่าไหร่นะครับอันที่2เป็นเรื่องของ impact ครับก็ลองดูว่าimpact ที่จะเกิดขึ้นเนี่ยก็คืองานของเราเนี่ยอยากจะสร้างให้เกิด impact กับใครบ้างนะครับอาจจะเป็นระดับโลกเลยก็ได้นะครับระดับประเทศระดับโรงเรียนหรือว่าแม้กระทั่งในครอบครัวก็ได้ครับแล้วก็สุดท้ายเนี่ยคือเรื่องของ creativity นะฮะ creativity หรือว่า expression ก็คืองานเนี่ยให้เราได้ปล่อยของหรือเปล่านะครับให้เราได้มีความพึงพอใจในเรื่องการปล่อยของพัฒนาทักษะที่เราอยากพัฒนาหรือเปล่าครับผม yeah I'm done
Got it? Okay. So, I want you to do this. Set your original dials. You're mixing your life song. What does your song sound like today? I'll give you a little music to think about that. About 3 minutes. Go. Where are you today? How satisfied are you with money? How satisfied are you with impact? How satisfied are you with your creative expression? Because everybody needs a little in their song. You can't have a song without all three things.
ทุกแท่งเป็นอิสระจากกันนะครับไม่ใช่3แท่งบวกกันได้100นะครับทุกแท่งเป็นอิสระจากกันนะครับ
All right, 10 seconds. Okay, my watch says you're done. All right, you're done. Now, whatever your song is, I'll bet you could make it a little better. I'm going to say, you know, I notice money's fine, but I just feel like I'm not having as much impact as I'd like. Can I make my impact up? So I'm going to watch the red. I added impact. Do it again. All right. Figure out which one dot you want to make. Just like with the dashboard. Figure out a simple way to do it. It's a simple prototype. You got to be able to do it in 1 week. It's got to cost almost nothing. Let's say I wanted to get a little more money. What could I prototype in 1 week? Well, let's say I know a lot about cryptocurrency. I put an ad on Facebook. I say, call me, I'll tell you about cryptocurrency. See who calls. A couple people call. I can charge some money. Simple prototype. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else. What if I wanted to have more impact? Well, I know it doesn't look like it now, but I used to be a gymnast in high school and college. I was proportioned differently, let's just say. But my little grandson goes to a gym. He's 2 years old. He doesn't really do gymnastics. But they roll on the mats, and they climb on the bars, and they do stuff, and they have a good time. So if I wanted to have a little more impact, I could ask the instructor, hey, do you guys need volunteers to help the little kids? Because I know gymnastics, I can help them. And if they let me help them, just for 1 day, I'm just try it for an hour. Wow. You know, the impact you can have. They teach these little kids how to tumble, make them feel strong, make them feel like they can try anything, you know, and make them safe. I would feel a lot of impact. Simple experiment. Expression. Well, you know, I like to bake, and my wife loves roses. So what if I went on YouTube and found a video of how to make roses out of icing, and I made her a cake, and I gave it to her, and it had roses on it, and she was so happy she cried. That would be expression. So pick something simple. See if you can figure it out. Go. What could you do to slide one dial just a little bit? Set the bar low, something you could actually try in the next 5 days. A little prototype. Often a prototype is just having a conversation with an expert. Find somebody who knows how to make roses out of icing. All right. You got an idea? Now, here's the thing. Maybe have 100 people in the audience or something like that. And the last time I had you share it with a friend, and we don't have time to do that today, but here's the research on prototyping, or actually it's the research on making a change. So let's say you came up with the idea you're going to bake a cake and learn how to make roses, or you're going to go to a gym and help little kids. It's a good idea, and you could do it. But unfortunately, the research tells me that 8 out of 10 of you, 80% of you, even if you leave here saying, I'm going to try this, you won't do it. 8 out of 10 of you will fail to build your prototype. Even though you came up with a good idea, it's very simple, it would only take you 1 hour. You won't do it. 20% of you will try it. And I'll tell you what will happen if you try it. I'll give you an example. I had a student who was doing this exercise, and he was really stuck. And he said, you know, I just want to have a little more impact in the world. And I said, well, what do you know how to do? And he said, I know how to do this thing. And I said, well, go call this person and have coffee with them. They know how to do this. They're an expert. They can help you get started. And he did it because I assigned him to do it. And he came back and he said, you can't believe what happened. I said, yeah, I know what's going to happen. Tell me what happened to you. He said, well, I was talking to this expert about this thing, cryptocurrency or something, and then we got to talking about my major, and then we got to talking about what he was doing, and he's got a new startup. And as we talked about it, he realized that he needed a human-centered designer like me, and he liked the fact that I was curious, that I had a lot of energy. He offered me a job. So I went into the world to do a simple prototype about impact, and I came back with a job at a really cool startup. I said, I know, that happens all the time. Because it's not just the prototype that you're running. The world is running hundreds and hundreds and thousands of prototypes, but you have to get in the conversation. All right, so I said 8 out of 10 of you will fail. I'm sorry. That's just the data. You want to double your chance of success? You want to double your chance of success? This is the share it with a friend. Now, Pom has a wonderful, I call him Perm, but Pong, I guess is the other nickname. Perm has a wonderful exercise that we do in the workshop we do together, where he gives everyone a postcard. And you write down the prototype that you're going to run, and you email, and you send the physical postcard. You write the address of your friend, and you send the postcard. He already has a stamp on it, easy to do. You send the postcard to your friend. And when your friend gets the postcard 3 or 4 days later, he calls you up and says, I just got your postcard, and it says you committed to building, to making a cake for your wife with beautiful roses on it. How you doing? Knowing that you sent the postcard and made yourself accountable to a friend. And all the friend has to do is call you up and say, how you doing? Doubles your chance that you will do it. Why? Because we're social animals, and we want social acceptance. We want our friends to think we're we have good commitments. So if you make yourself accountable to someone else, and all they have to do is ask you, how's it going? You'll double the opportunity to build a prototype that puts you in the world that might change your life, get you a job offer, or something even more amazing. I have had people doing simple prototypes in the world meet their life partner, meet the person they're going to marry. Job offers happen all the time. That's easy. there's a thing called the law of attraction, and I don't know anything about it. Somebody told me about it the other day. I think it might be sort of crazy, but I know this. A person who has curiosity is an interesting person. I like to talk to people who have energy and personality. And a curious person, a person with that mindset, who's not coming asking me for anything other than a story and maybe a little bit of help, a little direction. I love talking to people like that. And I love helping people like that. And so do you. And so does everybody else in the room. Prototyping isn't just running the experiment. It's radical collaboration. It's practicing curiosity. And it's leaving yourself open to the possibility that there's an even better answer to the question than the question you asked. Because it's out in the world with real people. So, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Sorry, thought we had turned that one off. That's another model. My students want to have impact. There's a great way to measure impact, but we're not going to do it because we don't have time. I want to talk about getting unstuck because we've all been a little bit stuck with all these disruptions, and particularly COVID got us real stuck. So there's something in the model I haven't told you yet. That's the model for designing products and services and digital things, apps and websites and stuff. Start with empathy, redefine the problem, come up with lots of ideas, prototype and test. But in life design, we have to add one more step. And the step is called accept. And here's the thing. If my buddy Dave Evans, my co-author, my co-founder, were here, he likes to say, you can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. It's a little bit of a game. You can't solve a problem you're not willing to accept. Another way of saying it is that until you accept that you want something to change, nothing's going to happen. And it's hard sometimes to get your energy up for accept because change, even small changes like we suggest, evoke that fear response to novelty. Change creates fear. What if the new thing doesn't work? What if the new thing is embarrassing? What if nobody likes me? What if, right? So you're all here and you're at this amazing interdisciplinary school, so you like to accept challenges and change. You like to innovate. But I'll bet you have a friend who complains all the time. I'll bet you have a friend who doesn't like their classes, doesn't like their professor, doesn't like their roommate, doesn't like their subject, doesn't like coffee, doesn't like something, and they complain all the time. When you go out for a drink or coffee or something, you just complain. They really like their problem. They don't want to fix it because fixing it would require them to make a change. And change is hard. So accept is probably the most difficult part of the process, but that's why we use curiosity and social proof to propel us into the world as interesting people. But here's the other problem. We just had, in the world and life as we know it, this horrible thing called COVID. And COVID put us all into the waiting room. When it first started, I thought, well, a couple of months. We can teach online for a couple months, and then it was 6 months, and then it was a year, and then, oh my God, is this going to keep going? And then it was 2 years, and now it's almost 3, and we're not really all the way through, finished, completely. And here's the problem, of course. When you're in a waiting room, how do you feel? Terrible. You have no power. You don't know you can't get out of the waiting room because the new thing hasn't occurred yet. The new world isn't here yet. And you're stuck. And you feel powerless. And then you get depressed. And you cannot be creative when you are in that state of mind. And so the waiting room is a deadly place for creative people. And here's the thing. It's not just the disruption of COVID. In the old world to the new world, and that could be the old world was before ChatGPT 4, and the new world is after chat. What are we going to do? How do we educate? What if everybody just writes their essays with chat? The easiest thing to replace with chat is a professor, because most professors just lecture, and they've been using the same lecture for 10 years. You can just load them into chat, and then you don't need them anymore. By the way, I learned a new word just this week. You know the term FOMO? Fear of missing out, F-O-M-O, FOMO, have you heard that? A lot of students have FOMO. Oh, I got to take all the classes, I got to double major, I got to have all these things. FOMO, FOMO, FOMO. All right. There's a new word, it's called FOBO, F-O-B-O. Fear of becoming obsolete. Fear of becoming obsolete because AI wipes out your career. So any disruption, old world to new world, before chat, after chat, it doesn't just go that way. We know from our COVID experience something else happens. There's this thing in the middle, this big gap, where nobody knows how it's going to turn out. And that gap, in the climate disruption, in the AI disruption, in the COVID disruption, in any economic disruption, or just something in your personal life which is changing, and you can't go backwards anymore, and you have to go forwards, but you're not exactly sure where you're going, because it's not clear yet what the new world looks like. In that gap, we find ourselves back in the waiting room. In any disruption, we will find ourselves in the waiting room again and again. And in the waiting room, we have no power, we have no creativity, we have no agency, we can't move forward. So, obviously, we have to reframe. Because in that waiting room, there's a possibility hidden right in front of our eyes. The waiting room can be, the acceptance zone. During COVID, when we had to teach online, I got all my teaching teams together. I said, we are no longer teaching a class. It's a radio show. It's online, it's a radio show. We will have opening music, we will have commercials, and we will have ending music. We'll have a theme for every show, and your job is to be entertaining, not just teaching. You're now entertainers, you're now radio personalities. And we worked really hard. We wrote a theme song, we had music, we had breaks, because you can't teach too long on Zoom without breaks. And we reframed the whole thing as a radio show, and we all learned new things, because we accepted we were in the waiting room, and we were going to make it work. And we were creative, and we were energized, and it was actually an exciting time. If you find yourself in a disruption, and you notice you're not at the new place yet, please do not stay in the waiting room. Change your mind. Your mind needs to come to accept, because you are here right now in the reality of we don't know what comes next. And you cannot let yourself descend into helplessness or depression, because you cannot work from that point of view. You have to change your mind and be in the acceptance zone, and that is how we do disruption design. And it doesn't matter what the disruption is. And sometimes the disruptions are personal and they're not visible to anyone else. No one knows that we're in the gap in the middle. No one knows why we feel the way we feel. So we have to radically collaborate with people in the world. It's the antidote to this tremendous sort of epidemic of loneliness. Get out of the waiting room, get into the acceptance zone. If you want to change your life, change your mindset. You can do it. It just takes some practice. And then finally, in times of high change, and even in just times of, regular things, we need to figure out how to be more resilient, how to be stronger, how to approach our future with more optimism. And so we have a method for that, which really pulls everything I've just talked about together in one simple cycle. And once you start the cycle, and I'll explain it to you, and you get these mindsets working, every time you go through the cycle, your energy increases. Every time you go through the cycle, the opportunities increase. In fact, the circle gets larger. And if you practice this resilience cycle, the opportunities I just talked about that you discover through prototyping are almost endless. And here's how it works. I'm going to start with my favorite one. My favorite mindset is get curious, because curiosity will be the energy that makes you try something new, even if it's scary. Suppress that fear response, try something new, get curious. And then go out and talk to people, because radical collaboration, the ideas are in the world, the network is out there, it's not in here, it's out there. Hundreds of other intelligences, all on different journeys. Get out in the world and talk to people. And then, try stuff. That's the prototyping phase. Take little tiny steps. And remember, every time I show you something that you've never seen before, we change our reality together. And now you have new opportunities, I have new ideas. And together we can create things that we could never have imagined alone. And then, the new mindset, the seventh mindset, tell your story. It turns out humans are narrative animals, that we have circuits in our brain designed around storytelling. In fact, there's a researcher in the UK who thinks that storytelling might have been an evolutionarily advantaged trait, so that the best storytellers passed on more genes. So someone who's good at telling stories had more babies, or talked someone into having more babies. I don't know much about that research, but I thought it was interesting to think about it as why are we wired for storytelling? Well, because stories contain emotions, and they contain the image of someone else, not us, going on a journey through the world or doing something interesting. And in that story, we can see ourselves. And that's where empathy gets turned on. And what's our first step in design? It's empathy. It's empathy for ourselves. What do we need? But just because you want something or you need something, the world doesn't care. I'm sorry, the world doesn't care what you need. You have to have empathy for the world. What does the world need? And then the magic is when you can connect the intimate needs of yourself to the ultimate needs of the world, what the world needs done, you're on the path. You found the true path. That's where it lies. It lies in working with others. It lies in the Harvard study, love and compassion, and lots of hard work. So this is a cycle, and it looks like this. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. The more you tell your story, the more people say, oh, that's so interesting. You know, I have a friend who's doing the same kind of thing. You should talk to him. Oh, I know somebody who's doing that. You should talk to her. And as you spin up this flywheel, it starts very small. Small prototypes, small groups of people who introduce you to larger groups of people with bigger prototypes, who introduce you to larger groups of people, and the circle gets bigger, and the energy rises, and you find yourself resilient in the face of change. And then when something changes, because it will inevitably change, you are ready, and you redesign, and you come up with a better idea. and a better idea. This is the way, this is a very simple, it's 10 words. It's the whole lecture in 10 words. It's how we repeat to get more engaged, and it's how we design our lives and our work to be meaningful, to be in the world with people, to maximize our opportunity for connection, love, compassion. And it really, really fundamentally comes down to exercising our human agency, our human creativity to make the world a better place. Now, I said at the beginning there's a lot of bad stuff happening, and sometimes you get kind of down and you're not sure there's even a future that's possible, but I'm an optimist. Design is a very interesting sort of system. It's not political. It's not based. It's not sociological. It's not trying to solve economic problems, although designers can do that. But design has one basic principle that it relies on all the time, and that is that the next design will be better than the last one, and the one after that will be better than that. So if that's possible, if that's true, and we've got a cycle of sort of mindsets that generate this flywheel of activity, and we have a really good sense of who we are, empathy for ourselves, and we know what the world needs, or at least something the world needs that I think I can provide, that is the recipe for the rest of your life being very, very interesting. Now, I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, so I'm going to wrap it up. And a couple of things, as I mentioned, this is based on human-centered design. When David Kelly started the D School in 2006, and people started talking about design thinking, but David and I were in the program way, way back in the 70s, and the program started in 1963. So we have been researching and perfecting our techniques for innovation and human-centered design for 57, 58 years, a very long time. Much longer than probably you heard about it when you heard about design thinking. And as I mentioned, our class is based on research. So I have positive psychology research that talks about these mindsets and how they change outcomes. I have positive psychology research on how to get good at being lucky. Luck is, in fact, designable. I have research on our class that says it improves career self-efficacy, doubles ideation, gets rid of dysfunctional beliefs. But the reason it works is that it is absolutely empirically based on humans. Dave Evans and I started the class in 2007. We just thought it was going to be I had 15 students. It was a small thing. We were going to help them figure out how to find jobs, and then we'd be done. And now we teach every quarter. I have a whole team. I have the Life Design Lab, and Kathy Davies, who's my amazing managing director, and she finds the most amazing DLife fellows who come in. One of our fellows was a Dalai Lama fellow. One of our fellows is a star athlete. And they're amazing people, and they teach the life design classes, and now we have a class for freshmen called Designing Your Stanford. By the way, we have a class at the Thai Chamber of Commerce University, Thai University Chamber of Commerce, you know the name. We trained them in 2018, 2019, and they teach classes for all their freshmen, just like ours, Designing Your Stanford. And we have Designing Your Life for the seniors as they launch into their first career. And I just finished in June teaching the class for the MBA students. We call it Designing the Professional, and also PhD students who are struggling to figure out what to do with 7 or 8 years of education that they want to play out in the world. And then we have classes in the world for people in their mid-career, in their 30s, people in their retirement career. We call it Designing Your Longevity. Because if you're 20-something years old, the data says that you will be the first generation not only to live to 100 on average, but to live to a healthy 100. Your lifespan and your health span will be almost the same thing. which means that if you retire at 60 or 70 years old, you got 30 more years of productive life in you. You better have a design. You can't just play golf. So we have research-based work. It's human-centered. When we started the class in 2007, we had about 10 different exercises. We don't use any of those anymore. We have prototyped and iterated hundreds of times. We now have 40 or 50 different ways of breaking down the design problem of life design. And we test and we improve and we test and we improve every single quarter. So we know this stuff works, and we know it because it works in the world, in the real world, with real people. That's the ultimate test, I think. When I ask students after the class, we do surveys, I say, what happened? You took the class, what happened? They say three things. I used to be stuck. I didn't know what major I wanted to pick, or I didn't know what job I wanted to pick, and now I'm not stuck anymore. I've got a whole bunch of ideas about how to move forward. I don't know exactly what the solution will be, but I know how to get there. I feel like I'm the agent in my life. I feel powerful. I feel like I'm more creative, what David Kelly called in his book, Creative Confidence. My confidence in my creativity is up again. I know I'm not an artist. That's not the point. But I'm a creative person, and I can use creative problem solving on anything in my life. So I get unstuck. I feel more creative. And I think these tools will last for a long time because they won't be obsolete when the software changes or other things change. One quick story, and then I'll wrap up. I have an offer to all of my students. If you take one of my classes at Stanford, you get office hours for life. You can call me anytime and say, I need to talk to you about something, a job or something, and I'll say, sure, we'll set up a meeting, and you can have office hours. You can come in live, or you can do it on Zoom. Yesterday, I got an email. I'm in the hotel. I got an email from my student. Her name is Mariana. She graduated in 2001. That was 22 years ago. The email was, hi Bill, is it really true that I get office hours for life because I just took this job? I'm now the head of this amazing new healthcare lab at the UCSF hospital. It's called Better Lab. I just took over as the director, and I have a whole bunch of questions about how to organize, a creative innovation lab. So I hope you have some time. And she got an email back in 20 minutes saying, yep, you get office hours for life. I happen to be in Thailand, so we'll have to do it on Zoom, but let's go. And congratulations on your new job. This is incredible. And the students for some reason, the students think, oh, that's so amazing. He's so nice. He's doing this. It's like, no. I'm deeply curious. I want to know what Mariana's doing. I haven't talked to her in 20 years. Turns out she's been doing design, and she's so good that she just got hired by one of the best university hospital systems to run their healthcare innovation program. And I'm like, awesome. Tell me what you're using. What are your tools? How is it going? What are you doing that's new that I don't know about? I ask my students, like, what's on your phone? I had a TikTok account before any of my other professor colleagues knew what a TikTok was. They thought it was a clock. I just love it. I'm so curious. And so when they call me up, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, I've been teaching a long time. I learned so much. It's a gift to me. They think I'm doing it to be nice to them. No. It's a gift to me to be able to connect to these students and find out how their education has helped their life to thrive, to be wonderful. And it's a tremendous amount of, I get a tremendous amount of joy. So in the end, everybody, in a school like this, you want to be the top of your school. You want to be the best. You want to have more more tools, more software, more education, better grades, higher grades, more performance. You know what my least favorite question is? What's your superpower? I don't know, that seems to be popular now. What's your superpower? And I say, I'm a human being, I have no superpowers. And some days, I don't even really want to get out of bed. So that's just the way it is. There's no superpower here. So, what I would like to leave you with is 3 things. I know everybody wants to be more and everybody wants to be the best. But could we reframe that to being more human? Because it is in the human interaction that we have, not on our phones, but live in the world. That's where the magic can happen. That's where the prototype turns into a job, or maybe the person you fall in love with. So focus on being more human. Oh, and by the way, AI, it's never going to be human. It's not even AI, it's just a large language model. Everybody's all freaked out. But even when we get to general AI, the one thing it can't replace is the thing we have together as human beings. And could we be more helpful? Because someone's going to come and tell you a story, and they're on a journey, and they're a life designer, and they want to ask you a question. Help them. Offer them office hours for life. You'll learn so much. And in the process of doing that, in the face of all the things that are happening, some of which just look pretty bad, could we be more hopeful? Human, helpful, hopeful. Because as I said, design only has one value system, and that's we're going to make the next design better. And I know we've screwed up on climate, and we've screwed up on energy, and we've screwed up on a bunch of other things. But we're the most creative, people on the planet, and you're in one of the best universities in the world, and you got to go out and solve these problems. Because I'm too old. I give you a world of interesting problems. Climate, energy, you name it. Go out, be hopeful. Try to make the world a better place. Pick something small. Start there. Everything starts in the very beginning, right here, right where you are. Thank you very much. Oh, we don't have very much time. Yeah. Can we get a few questions? What do you think?
Maybe just 2?
All right. Who has a question? Now, let me tell you one quick story. Everybody said, oh, Thai students don't ask questions. And I said, that can't be true. Thai students are smart. They want to learn. You only learn if you ask a question. So take a little moment to think of a question, and then raise your hand. Here's one. We got our first one. Okay. What's your name?
My name is Wendy.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, great.
We have to be human first, okay?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's human.
I'm
Yeah.
nervous
Nice to meet you.
Right. Thank you. You talked about fear, right? And one of the things we learn is to make small changes. But do you have any more tips on if you're really stuck and then you're so you have it's
Yeah, it's hard.
You're scared to do something because
Yeah.
you're so used to doing the same thing. So besides I mean, what is?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's quite human to be scared. Changing things is scary, and even if we know we don't like where we are, we aren't necessarily sure we're going to like a new thing either. So yeah, I get scared a lot. I don't like to change things. It's hard, but we know a lot now about the psychology of change, of behavior change. Lots of designers are working on behavior change. And there was a couple books that came out just recently. One of my colleagues at Stanford wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And there's another book, I think maybe it's more popular, I think I saw it in Thailand, Atomic Habits. And what they said is, okay, because the brain is wired to protect you from change, because change is scary, we have to figure out a process to get around that wiring, because everybody has it. It's not easy to change. And you do it by breaking, there's things called triggers, what triggers your behavior. And then there's things, that are basically your habits. There's habits and triggers, and then there's rewards. And if you set up the pattern correctly, you can give yourself rewards for very small changes, and that slowly rewires your brain. And now, as a designer, I like lots of changes because changes make my brain really happy because they give me a new problem to solve. But when I started, I was very shy and very fearful because I didn't want to try new things because I was afraid people would think I was being foolish. So look at Atomic Habits, study the process because it's a process. You can change the way your brain is wired and eventually get to the point where instead of a fear response, you get a flash of endorphins, the pleasure chemicals. So when a change occurs, instead of going, oh, I don't know if I want to try that, you actually go, oh, wow, that's interesting. And so look at that, because it's good science. And be kind to yourself. It's hard to change. It's very hard. So don't think everybody else can do it. They can't do it. They're not even going to try. But you're going to try because you're going to read the book. One more? Wait, we got two. One there and one there. What are you? And then we'll go to the one in the back. Go ahead. I'll give short answers. I promise. I can give the long professor answer or the short media answer. Okay. Hello.
Okay, hello. Thank you very much for the lecture today. It's like from the lecture I could imagine, it's like I have any kinds of parameter to achieve my work-life balance. It's like I could adjust my work, my play, or my love to achieve it. And second of all, it's so interested to talk about framing. It's like in the point that you mentioned before, because we could change the dysfunctional belief into something meaningful. It's like to start our life or problem that we have actually. But in non-ideal condition in our life, especially point of view of our social constructions, is too hard for me as a beginner to achieve the reframing itself. Because human habit, especially me, are formed from the patterns evolving into the personality and changing into characteristic and come to the habit. Right. So my question is, I would like to try to elaborate in the social construct with the reframing. So on how we create a more open and flexible mindset in social constructions so we can effectively practice reframing and influence our habit. Because to start habit to do reframe is very difficult for me, especially as a beginner. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think there's a long question. Let me make sure. You mentioned dysfunctional beliefs, and you mentioned, trying to reframe and how difficult it is sometimes to kind of come up with a good reframe, right? So, and the question is how to get better?
Pardon me?
Your question is, how do I get better at reframing?
Oh yeah. How can we create a more open and flexible mindset in social constructions so that we can effectively practice reframing and influence our habit?
Right. So again, it's an issue that our brain. Here's an interesting thing about brains. Your brain weighs about 2.5 to 3 pounds. 1.5 kilograms or so. And in your body, let's say your body is 180 pounds and your brain is 3 pounds. So your brain is like 2% of your body weight. The average person consumes about 2,000 calories a day, and the brain consumes 500 calories. 25% of your energy goes to running your brain. Isn't that interesting? It's only 3% of your body, but 25% of your brain, of all the energy goes to running your brain. And so there's a thing called neuro-Darwinianism that says your body has evolved so that everything is in stasis, Everything's taking just enough energy to run, but no more than it needs. And your brain is taking 25% of the energy. But your brain is made up of 85 billion neurons. It's not 100, someone counted, it's only 85 billion neurons, with more connections than stars in the universe. So you've got this amazing processor running on 500 calories, most of the energy in your body going to running your brain, and your brain can do amazing things, calculations, it can write Shakespeare, it can create poetry, songs, music, you name it, art. It's a 40-watt processor, 40 watts. Add up all the neurons, it's 40 watts. My laptop is 120 watts. I checked. The big Watson supercomputer that won the Jeopardy challenge is 250,000 watts, and it runs on 10 server platforms, and it needs an air conditioning system to run, and your brain runs at room temperature. It even runs at the temperature here in Bangkok, which is pretty hot sometimes. So how does this little tiny 40-watt processor running at room temperature outperform, supercomputers? Well, it does it by building habits. The first time you see something, lots of neurons are involved, but the 9th or 10th or 15th time you see something, a neural pattern has emerged, and what they call the grandmother neuron, you can identify your grandmother, in a microsecond with just a few neurons firing because you've learned the pattern, just like chat learns a pattern of language. Okay, why did I say that? Well, because the way you learn to reframe is the same way you learned to be stuck in a frame. You practice. And you practice reframing, and you're getting better when the new frame for the problem contains more possible solutions. Because the goal of reframing is freedom in life design. It's freedom to choose. So I have to reprogram this little processor that loves habits because it can't run all the time with all the neurons firing. It's too hard, it's too high energy. So it has to create little tiny habits. This is a habit for recognizing my grandmother. This is a habit for how I study. This is a habit for how I talk to my friends. The habits can be rewired, but it takes practice. It takes, in behavior change, in atomic habits, they'll tell you it takes 6 to 8 weeks to either eliminate a bad habit, stop doing it, or to establish a new habit. And that comes from, it takes about that much time to train the neural networks on the new habit. So you can do it, but it takes time. Last question in the back. Way in the back. That's how chat learns sentences, by the way. There's trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of sentences, and it doesn't actually think. Chat has no idea what it's saying. It's simply a large language model. It just predicts the next word. It doesn't know what the sentence means. So it is not intelligence. Yes?
Yeah, hello, Cap.
Hi,
Thank you for your lecture today.
What's your name?
Mint.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, Bill.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Okay, for my last question, in our design process, we have to do some prototype, we test, we learn, and we do this again and again. We run the cycle, right? But in some situation or some project, we have a timeline. We have a limited sort of time. How can we do the prototypes more faster, or test it faster, or do it in efficient way to get close to the answer that we would like to know?
Okay, so what I hear is, how can I do the prototypes faster or better so that I can learn faster and get to a good conclusion? I like the question because I think there are many, many ways. We have a whole workshop on prototyping, many ways to design prototypes so that they really get to an interesting question or an interesting experiment. If you think about how scientists design experiments, they have a hypothesis and they run an experiment and they test the data. We're not being quite that scientific, but we have a question we want to ask, we build a prototype, we have an experience, we learn. And so we have lots of ways of accelerating that process so that you're likely that the next prototype is even better asking a better question and a better question. But the thing I want to change a little about your question is it's not about getting to best, because we don't know what best is. Because when we're in the future, we don't even know what the constraints are of the new design yet. So nobody knew that the iPhone was the best. They just knew it was radically different. So I would absolutely go for the most efficient, fastest prototyping process will get you to a solution sooner. A piece of data, IDEO, the famous design company that David Kelly started, has a toy division where they invent and sell toys. There was a research study done by a guy named Bob Sutton, who's a professor at Stanford in the Management Science and Engineering group, and he studied their toy invention process. It ended up in a year, they had 2,000 ideas that yielded 200 prototypes, that yielded 200 toy proposals, which sold 10 toys to the toy industry, 2 of which were big hits. So 2 out of 2,000, right? So if you want to get through that process efficiently, you have to prototype quickly, and you have to think about the best questions to ask. But in that process, they didn't know which toy would be best. They discovered it along the way. So prototype fast, do lots. That's the secret to success. We know from lots of startup studies and research on other companies. Companies that build more prototypes have more successful products. But it's always unexpected where you end up. So be careful about thinking that there's a best solution. You're going to discover a solution much better than the one you were aiming for if you do the process well. But thank you for the question. Okay, thank you very much. That's it for the evening. I hope you have a very lovely evening after this, Friday night. Go do something fun. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Burnett. It was a pleasure having you, and I hope that our audience today have learned and appreciated some of the insights and approaches that they can start utilizing as soon as they step out of this door. So thank you very much all for coming. May I just ask Dr. Warnya Chamchuri to come on stage to present the gift from our school to our speaker, and afterwards we will conclude. So this is the gift. You give the gift to the person. All right. Thank you once again for coming and enlightening us, and thank you for everyone joining this session, and keep being curious and keep being excited about the world. All right, and have the great rest of the day and the weekend ahead. Thank you, everyone, and free to go. Enjoy. Bye. Thank you.